Hi y'all, this is Larry from Deep South Texas, and today we're going to make homemade pizza. Now we have pizza, every week or two, so I make it quite a bit. So I thought I'd make one for you. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to do though, we're going to make our own homemade pizza sauce. So let's check out what those ingredients are. So here are the ingredients for the sauce. I have a pint of my home canned tomatoes. We're going to use a teaspoon of olive oil. I have got a small onion from the garden, diced finely, and I'll use just a teaspoon of that onion in the sauce. The rest of the onion I'll put on the pizza. 1 small clove of garlic, and a 1/4 teaspoon of oregano leaves, a 1/4 teaspoon of basil, a 1/4 teaspoon of crushed red pepper, a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, and a 1/4 teaspoon of sugar. All in here. Let's get started. So we're going to add a teaspoon of olive oil to the pan. And then to that we're going to add a heaping teaspoon of our onions. And the garlic. And we'll sweat those down a little bit, and then we'll add the rest of the ingredients. Okay, the onion and garlic has cooked a little bit. Now we're going to add our tomatoes. This is home canned crushed tomatoes. It's if you don't have your own home canned tomatoes, you can use diced tomatoes from the store. A can of diced tomatoes should work out just fine. And we'll put in the rest of our spices here. And stir that up. We'll let that cook a little bit, and when everything gets softened up, I have a immersion blender here. We'll probably puree that, and then we will let it set and simmer for an hour or two until we have our pizza sauce. And I got plenty of time because I got to make the pizza dough, and that's what we'll be doing next. And for the pizza dough, we have 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 6 ounces of warm water, a tablespoon of olive oil, a teaspoon of instant yeast, a teaspoon of granulated sugar, and I like to put in a teaspoon of garlic salt. So we put our water in the mixing bowl. Going to add in a teaspoon of instant yeast. And then we're going to add a teaspoon of sugar. Stir that up a little bit. And we'll wait for a little bit until that yeast blooms. Now, you don't really need to do that when you're using instant yeast, but some of you may have active dry yeast, and in that case you want to let it set until you see the yeast start to bubble. So we'll get back when the yeast is ready. Well, it's been just a few minutes and our yeast has started to bloom. Now we're going to add 1 tablespoon of olive oil. Mix that up, and then we're going to add 1 teaspoon of garlic salt to our flour and mix that in a little bit. And now we just start adding our flour to the yeast, water, and oil mixture. Say it's 1.5 cups. I may use a little bit more or a little bit less, depending on how the dough feels. So we'll finish mixing that and then get back to you. So just used that 1.5 cups of flour, no more, no less, so it worked out okay. Now I'm going to clean this bowl out, oil the bowl, and put the dough back in, and we'll let that rise for about an hour. With a cloth here, and we'll come back and check on that, but I think maybe it's time to blend up those tomatoes. Let's move over to the stove. Okay, let's take the immersion blender to these tomatoes. Hope this doesn't get too noisy. There, that looks pretty good. Now we'll just let this simmer till we're ready to put it on the pizza. Well, our pizza dough has risen, and it's time to get it patted out in the pan. I have buttered this pan, and this pan is 15 inches in diameter. Now I wish I was good enough to, throw this up in the air and twirl it around, but I'm not. So I just pat my pizza dough out by hand. So the pizza dough has been patted out, and now we just cover it again and let it set for about another hour till it's ready to go in the oven. So our dough has been rising in the pan for about an hour, and I pre-bake my pizza dough. It's the only way I found I can get it crispy enough in the oven. So before I put it in the oven, I poke some holes in it with a fork so that it doesn't puff up too badly. So let's get that in the oven. It'll be in there 5 or 10 minutes till it just turns a light brown. So we pre-baked our pizza crust, and now I'm going to move it over to this pizza peel that I've put a thin layer of cornmeal on the bottom. And we're going to decorate the pizza and then slide it into the oven. Now I didn't mention there is a pizza stone in the oven, and the oven is at 450 degrees. So let's get our sauce and start decorating this pizza. So our homemade pizza sauce came out pretty good and tastes good too. So let's start putting that out on our pizza. So that was 1 pint of home canned tomatoes, and I think that's going to be just the right amount for this pizza. Scrape out all the goodness here. All right, and I've got a couple spices here. First, just pizza seasoning. We'll shake that on as much as you like. And then we like to add a little bit of fennel. And then a little bit of my homemade Parmesan cheese. We'll put a little bit more on top later, but right now, some on the bottom here. And then the rest of our onions, the one small onion we diced up, we used a little bit for the sauce. Put the rest of it on the pizza here. And then I have to get some mozzarella cheese. So unfortunately, this is purchased mozzarella cheese, not mozzarella cheese that I made. I'm still having issues getting it to turn out right, so I'm still using purchased mozzarella cheese. Sorry about that. Someday I'll have the real thing. That looks good. And now some pepperonis. And I put them on pretty thickly, but they shrink down when you cook them. So it looks like a lot of pepperoni right now, but when it comes out of the oven, it's not quite so much. And the pepperoni's on. Now let's sprinkle just a little bit more Parmesan cheese on the top. And into the oven it goes until it's all bubbly and the mozzarella is starting to turn a little bit brown. Well, it's time to get this pizza out of the oven. And it's looking pretty good. Let's take a closer look at it. Oh yeah, it looks good and it smells great. We'll let that cool down for a minute and then we'll cut into it. Let's see if we can get a look at that, the bottom crust there. That looks pretty nice. That looks pretty nice. Okay, let's give this pepperoni pizza a try. That is good. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it that thumbs up. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.